Here we are, my lovelies. Thursdays, 11 a.m. is QT Conversations. It's our open-ended ramble through the big thinking in tutoring. And I've created a little routine. What was it, Dee?
I don't know if it's just me, but your sound is okay, but it sounds tinnier than it usually does.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
what I shall do then, thank you for telling me that, is I shall turn the fan off.
You could just talk louder, but
I had a cold this week. I'm surprised I can talk at all.
could
But
be worse. Could be tonsillitis.
no. Oh, did you have that? Emma had that.
Emma
I
had
might have
that.
that.
Okay, now all of LinkedIn knows that Emma had that.
I think all of LinkedIn knew
But you
anyway.
know I need your camera on. Okay, let's go. So, QT Conversations has a routine this year. We are rotating between what are we rotating between, Dee? We're rotating between research informed practice, business of tutoring, the book club, which is this week. And then next week, we're going to be celebrating successes, which is always a joy. Because all of those conversations work, each one has its own flavor. And we want to do more of each of them. Helen mentioned to me when I was talking about planning this year's curriculum, Helen said, can we revisit some of last year's material and go deeper because of the reflections that have happened since? So I hope that this rotation is going to enable us to do that instead of quite a quick succession. I'm addicted to these conversations, and I hope you are as well. And I tell you really, really personally, they're building my confidence. And that's what they're designed to do because there's no wrongs around here. There's just a whole lot of shared thinking. So today we're looking at this book, What Works, which is written by Lee Elliot Major and Steve Higgins. Can anyone tell me about Lee Elliot Major, please, my lovelies? Go on, Helen.
He's a professor at, I want to say Exeter
Yes.
University on social mobility and education and that sort of field.
And why are tutors forever grateful to him? So he put out the first paper recommending the National Tutoring Programme.
The NTP.
Yeah, he called it something different, something slightly different that's escaping me right now. But really what he was doing was he was saying the evidence. At the time, he was running the Education Endowment Foundation, which we know created the... Doing this to them today. Go on, Dee.
Is that the thing that we did that you were showing us the other week?
Yeah, that thing. Teaching and Learning Toolkit.
That's
So
the
the
one.
Education Endowment Foundation, that's my checking in with you. The Education Endowment Foundation created the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, which is a fantastic, highly interactive and accessible online tool to help school leaders choose where to spend their pupil premium money. So it uses research to evaluate different types of intervention. This is the book of that tool. So usually we go live and we explore the tool together and we look at what works well, we look at what the impact is, we'll pick on one of those topics and we'll dive into it together. The nice thing about a book on it, well, the downside of a book on it is it doesn't dynamically update, right? So actually those research, if you read them over the years, you'll see that they do update them. But this is very sort of, I mean, you know how I feel about books. This is beautifully put together, beautifully interactive, probably informed the way that I planned the Love Tutoring book. But I think there's some pages in here that I haven't seen on the Education Endowment Foundation website. And actually, that's what I wanted to focus on with you. So we're going to do three things in this conversation. I'm going to share with you a page that he calls the 6 dimensions of pedagogy. We're going to sort of fly over those because I think it's nice to continue rooting ourselves in teaching and learning and sort of get a real strong sense of what it looks like as a whole discipline. And then we're going to unpick 10 teaching myths. And I'm going to rely on you to share your prior knowledge, especially conversations that we've had in the past that have informed that knowledge, because I want to move through this material quite quickly so that we can then dip into, Dee, what did you ask me to cover this week?
Oh, Thank you. Yes.
Feedback. So a couple of weeks ago on the Monday session, we just got to the point of how important feedback is, and then we wandered off into something else, and it was the end of the session. So I wanted to make sure that we ring fence at least 20 minutes to dive into that. Is all of that okay with you? Have you had your coffee? Because we're going fast today.
That's it. We're going to get that all in.
It's decaf, but it's a bucket. Decaf.
Okay. Sounds to me like all that's going to do is make you need the loo.
So I get more steps in.
Right. So 6 dimensions of pedagogy. Here's the reading bit. Below is a starter kit for thinking about how effective your pedagogy is. The 6 dimensions were developed from a review of research and published guides of teaching effectiveness. You can use the list to reflect on your own practice. Which areas are you already doing well in, and what could be strengthened? Could you use the 6 dimensions to develop a school or department-wide plan to improve teaching in every classroom? Or in our context, tutoring. Helen, could I trouble you to drop these in the chat, please? Just do their headings, yeah? So the first one is pedagogical content knowledge. It isn't enough to know in depth the material being taught. Teachers must get inside the minds of pupils and understand how they think about a subject. They need to see what it looks like from the pupil's perspective as they traverse cul-de-sacs, wrong turns, and steep curves in their learning journey. Sarah, are you with us? Can I ask you, would you mind telling me your thoughts on that? No, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted. Can't hear you.
Sorry.
Good.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to put my hands up. I was so focused on spelling the word pedagogy and make sure I spelled it correctly.
I love you.
I zoned out. I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
I'm so happy that's just not like it's
No,
not
because
just
I
me.
had that.
I don't understand. Why is the word pedagogy difficult? It's like psychology.
I know, but I had this thing of when you said, Helen, can you write these titles in the chat? I then thought, oh my goodness, if Julia asks me, I'm going to have to get my dictionary to make
I love you. Which is why I didn't ask you, but now
I fluked it.
So I'm very sorry. Can you repeat the question? And
I
I'm
will,
more than happy to
because,
answer.
and you'll see why I called on you, okay? I didn't call on you for spelling, but I might call on Rosanna for spelling. Shall I just tell you what your jobs are? No, I'm joking. Okay, it isn't enough to know in depth the material being taught. Teachers must get inside the minds of pupils and understand how they think about a subject. They need to see what it looks like from the pupil's perspective as they traverse cul-de-sacs, wrong turns, and steep curves in their learning journey.
Yeah, I feel really passionately about that. And one of the things that some of you know is that I'm on this journey to become a dyslexia specialist and assessor. And I decided I was going to write a bit of a blog. I mean, it's not, I'm doing it every couple of months. But what I wanted to share, and I do share on my socials as well, is that it's hard and it's okay for it to be hard. Everything isn't a direct line to achieving what you want to. So you have to know what it feels like for the child in that situation to find something difficult. And if we don't put ourselves in those situations, we don't know how they feel. And so it's so important that we understand that and that we look at how we break down our teaching, because even though we get it, actually that doesn't mean to say that the children do. So we need to really unpick things so we can understand how to teach in a much better way.
Rosanna, we've talked about the curse of the expert before, haven't we?
That's exactly what came to mind for me, actually. I was actually going to make that point. It's really easy, I think, when you've been tutoring something or teaching something, oftentimes for years, and you know a subject inside out, to forget what it's like to be a beginner. And I think you've got to put yourself in the child's shoes and not assume that they've got that, even the basic level of knowledge or what you would deem to be basic, because for you it might be basic, but for them it's not. And I think this applies to every single subject that you tutor. You know, it's really easy to understand. Like, I think if someone, for example, was trying to tutor me maths, they would be shocked at like how little foundational knowledge I've got, right? But it's, you know, you just take things for granted, I think, a little bit.
Don't tell them, Rosanna, they don't know.
I'll keep it quiet. So yeah, I think it's really important to try to, you know, put yourself in your students' shoes. And I think there's some practical ways to do that, which is, you know, just to ask them. But I guess the difficulty with that is sometimes they might feel a bit embarrassed, like they're not comfortable to share what they don't know. So I think it's about not making assumptions is what I would say about what they do and don't know.
Beautiful.
And I think it's about making them feel, like you were saying, Rosanna, making them feel it's okay to say they don't know.
Yeah.
And the only way they can do that is if they can see that it's okay to make mistakes. And I think it's okay to make a mistake on purpose in the lesson. So like if I don't know, just say I was teaching a maths question and I added up something wrong, and they love to be the first ones to say, oh, you've done that wrong. And then for you to say, oh yeah, actually, it's okay for it to be wrong. Can you tell me how I get to the right answer? And you can find out so much about their understanding from doing that as well.
There's a lot of can you tell me in that, isn't there? Helen, I feel like you're fantastic at dispelling the curse of the expert and remembering what not understanding. I just wanted to share with you these 4 agreements, which is a book well worth looking at. Don't make assumptions is one of their key ideas there. I think it's so powerful. Rosanna, I'm not going to come to you now, Helen, but I was gonna because I want to move on and there's a pace. But I just wanted to identify that the curse of the expert is a thing that you always have to be mindful of because our students are novices. So number 2 is quality instruction. Great teachers are on-the-go orchestrators of learning, knowing when to prod and prompt, thinking about feedback here, Dee, when to go fast and slow, and when to focus one-to-one or whole class. They command a repertoire of tools, questioning, assessing progress, reviewing previous learning, providing model responses, allowing adequate time for practice to embed skills, and progressively introducing new learning, scaffolding. Effective instruction is all about enabling pupils to take the next steps in their own learning. Margaret Mary, what are your thoughts?
Yes. I think what I was thinking about as you were saying all that is weighting, as in EIGHT,
Nice.
because it depends on where the student is at. And one of the things that and this is what I like best about being a one-to-one tutor, which I didn't realize how frustrated I was in the classroom, because I knew there were times where if I had 20 minutes with that kid, they would get this. And you couldn't afford that as a classroom teacher. And I've just discovered as a one-to-one tutor how much more satisfying it is actually to be able to do that. And I know in terms of waiting, I'm going to relate it to the classroom, but then bring it to the tutoring. There were times where I gave up an outstanding lesson observation. And I remember in the feedback afterwards, I was like, yeah, and knowing that I made a choice because I was with a particular student, helping them, and I could hear the others had finished and were starting to chat. And it was like, well, I have a choice now. I can gather the class and ignore this one, or I can just spend these few minutes with this one. And more often than not, I chose to spend it with the one consciously. So it's like, I don't care about the observation.
Sarah, we know that feeling, right?
Yeah, but in the feedback I'm getting, oh, this is the point where your lesson changed from outstanding to just satisfactory. And I'm just thinking,
yeah, totally.
But the vindication was, I've been vindicated more than once, because the one occasion where that was said to me by the deputy head, that the kid I was talking about was the daughter of one of the English teachers. And she bumped into me in the corridor and said, Holly was saying this morning that she really enjoyed your lessons. She thought you were a great teacher because you never made her feel stupid and you always took the time to explain things. And I thought, yes.
That's what outstanding looks like. Put that on your certificate outside the school. Always takes time with every child and never makes them feel stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the same is true in tutoring. And I do make it explicit to my students. Ultimately, we want you to do this independently.
Yeah.
So what I say to them is, do you want to have a go at this on your own? And I'll stand back and I'll either jump in if you tell me you want a lead in, or I see you're struggling and you haven't told me yet. Or would you like me to give a lead in?
Perfect
And
segue.
there is a movement. I can see the movement in them. So sometimes it's about waiting. Do I let them do this independently? Because ultimately that is what we want. Or do I give them a lead in? And usually I ask them. And
Oh,
even if they say
good.
I'll try it myself and then I see them floundering, I say, well, I don't want to leave you floundering. So I make it clear why I'm doing what I'm doing.
It's intentional and it's articulated and it's trustworthy.
Yeah, and the
We go on to
student
the
has a
next one,
choice.
because you'll see that it's a perfect segue. James, I'm going to call on you to comment on this one. All right. Okay. So number 3 is classroom climate. Great teachers perform a delicate balancing act. They create a climate of high expectations, but aren't so demanding that they damage pupils' self-esteem. They link the success and progress of students to the effort they make rather than their apparent ability. They value resilience to failure or grit.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I think that in your topic, the student might be really not as strong at that topic, but they might be, they might have really good ability in sports, art. I teach maths, you might not be good at maths. So it's appreciating the little wins as well, I believe. Like
Nice.
if, if a student, I've had students starting from sort of ground zero, and if you get the small things and you build them up, it's about building that. And you've got to appreciate people come from different backgrounds, different environments. I mean, COVID's been a big hit, I think, on a lot of students as well, on their ability. So as a tutor and a teacher, you've got to understand that people come from different places,
Really nice.
and have different strengths. But I always like to, celebrate the little wins with the student. And
Very.
what I've implemented is, go on, sorry.
Well, I think that what you're saying about little wins is really powerful because what you're doing is you're tracking progress. Then you're showing them their own trajectory of success, which gives them that sense of resilience because they're feeling what good looks like. And if you don't wait till the end of the lesson, if they get that constantly from you, that this is what good looks like, this is good, then you build up their sense of how to manage their own positive learning behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to encourage to make mistakes as well. Because if you don't make mistakes, then it's too easy what we're doing. So we want to make mistakes, try things. Otherwise, if you never make a mistake, what you're doing is, you're not reaching your full
Really
potential.
nice. Really nice. An assessment that they're getting 100% on isn't really telling you very much, is it? Because you've not found their pitching point. Now, I want to move on to the next one. And Sarah, I'm going to call on you for this one, because in my mind, you're really the expert on managing groups. So it says number 4 is classroom management. Learning flourishes under the right conditions. Great teachers exude a calm authority, clamping down on misbehavior and consistently enforcing the lines pupils can't cross. Failure to discipline an unruly minority means less learning for the majority. Planning lesson time and classroom space are also important. So would you mind just turning the camera so we can see your background and then explain to us how you... Is there laundry on again?
You can't see it then. You can't see it then. Let me see if I can just move my camera. You will be able to see my washing machine. However, so
I love this room.
there is my washing. However, you can't see the stuff, thankfully. So this is my classroom in my loft. So as you can see at the moment, I've got one kind of whole table for my 8 children. However, depending on, oh, sorry, let me just put this back. Depending on the type of activity, or what I feel the ability of the children is for that particular task, I sometimes move the tables into groups of 4, and I might spend more time with one group than perhaps the other. that is exactly how I did things in school. It was very much a responsive approach to, we've done something, who understands, great, let's push you on, let's get on with what we're doing. The rest of them, if they need time for me to go through some more examples, then come on, let's come with me and we'll work through a few more examples together. And so my group sessions run exactly like that. So at the moment, I've got all my new students, so I'm still finding my feet with, you know, the level that they're working at, because even though I speak to their parents beforehand, parents and teachers' understanding of a child's ability may be quite different. You know, that is what we know from being in school or as tutors. It's that kind of deeper understanding of where they're working. So yeah, I move things around all the time, but you've got to get to know the children. If you know that a child picks things up really quickly, move them on, behaviour reduces. If they find things difficult and they need you to explain things more, have them with you a little bit more. You've got more control over behaviour and things like that because they're more focused. And then let's move them on in their own time. I do 11 plus. You know, yes, they should all be working at a particular level. However, they're all moving on at different speeds.
We
So
know what we feel about should, don't we?
Sorry, pardon?
We know how we feel about should, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. But I love that you've just associated pitch and pace with behaviour.
Yeah, I think that was, as a Senko, that was one of the big challenges in a whole, you know, it's different being in a class of 8 to being in a class of 30. I fully understand that and appreciate that. But I've taken my practice from a class of 30 and put it into a group situation of 8 children. And I would, you learn all the time.
You do, and your instincts develop as well. So I think of group tutoring like cooking dinner. You know, when I've got 5 gas rings.
Yeah.
So you've got all of them doing different things at different speeds at the same time, and you know what to turn up and what to turn down and what to leave to the side and what to get ready first because it needs that extra prep time and what you can do at the last minute. And all of those things are what you understand with your students.
It's about preparation as well, though, isn't it? So
nice.
I know with my new students, I've got a much higher level of additional needs. I feel that because of my background, I do tend to get in my 11 plus groups maybe a higher level of additional needs than perhaps a tutor around the corner, say, for example. But that's absolutely fine. They can still do that and they can still achieve. But I need to make sure I've got coloured overlays. I need to make sure I've got tracking things there so they can follow what we're doing. I need to make sure that they've got their own copy rather than looking at the board. They're fine, but you have to know the children.
That's right. And you have to have that commitment.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely beautiful. Helen, you're getting the last one. Teacher beliefs. Effective teachers are believers in human potential. Effective teachers are believers in human potential. One study found better maths results from teachers who believed all pupils are able to become numerate. It's not just how you teach, but why you teach that matters. Go ahead.
I think you might have heard me say something along those lines before, potentially. Just a few times. Just a few times. Yeah, particularly with maths. I think there's often an inherent, I can't do it. My parents couldn't do it. I don't like it. I've never done it well kind of thing. Actually, yeah, sorry, everyone can do maths. I'm going to put that out there now.
Rosanna, don't tell her.
Don't worry, I've already had requests from other tutors for doing A-level. No, it's fine. I'm not going to make you do it. But
thanks.
If you can believe, yeah, every student should be capable of doing even the higher tier GCSE maths. They might take time to get there. It might take more time than is assigned in the school day, in the school year, in the chronological passing of time. But yeah, every student gets there, and having that belief that actually you can do it, you really can, it encourages students to try. It's dispelling that I can't do maths, I'm bad at maths, and actually as soon as they start to get it, oh, actually I can do maths. That worked, I could do it, and then they've got more confidence to try the next thing, and then the next, and it builds. I had a student yesterday who said that the previous topic that we'd done in the test was in there, and she went, "I know this."
Was it mine?
It was yours, but could you tell by the tone?
Yes.
It was yours. I wasn't going to name it. No. Yeah, something we'd done in a previous session. She'd actually been able to sit down and doing the test when she couldn't do it, and that's obviously great because that builds that bit of confidence in the test. Okay, let's try the next question. Let's move on from there. So actually, just believing that they can do it, yeah, is so powerful.
And I think it's really interesting as well that, like, we're not sappy people, but we really, really believe this. Do you know what I mean? It's so intrinsic in who we are, in who you are, Helen, that you believe that people can do maths. Dee, what are your thoughts about expectations?
Yeah, like Helen, and yeah, we could get kids to achieve much higher. I mean, I've just thrown something in the chat of what something Sarah was saying about the way that, you know, she got a group of 8, and those that have got it, you know, she pushes them a bit more. Those that haven't, she might have to use, you know, for me in math, it's about finding the metaphor that works for that child. And if what you've already used hasn't worked, you have to, which is why you have to have the pedagogical understanding to know what metaphors you can use, that are what structures you can use.
Nice.
And this mastery approach is why we don't have that in schools. We have a sausage factory.
Because the inspectors will downgrade you if you give them the extra 20 minutes for mastery.
Yeah. And if we had a mastery approach right from year 2, and the kids didn't move on until they'd got it, then you don't reteach. You don't need to reteach, because the kids already have that underpinning knowledge, confidence, skills, and they've been stretched enough to see how they've seen that the connections.
Yeah,
they're not doing it they're not doing these topics in isolation. So it might take longer in years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to build that level, but once they've got it, then the rest of it isn't going to take as long, because you're not teaching them how to add and subtract fractions every year, which I had to do.
Go on, love. I interrupted you.
No, yes. I mean, it was this frustration of, beginning of a year 7, 8, 9, and 10, I taught every single class how to add and subtract fractions. What's that all about?
So, yeah, James, we absolutely agree. Nobody's bashing teachers here. We're just pointing out what the children's experience is, so we can way to help.
The teachers are as much the victims here as the children are.
Absolutely. And the fact that Margaret Mary was intentional about letting go of that judgment, that's coming from a superior place of confidence. Most training teachers can't afford to do that. And it's the children in every class who struggle. As you described that, Dee, I was thinking about how much confidence is ruined by year 2. And if you sort of imagined the confidence of adults and all of us sort of limping along with, I'm not good at this and I can't, all these limiting self-beliefs, that's where they started. That's where they all, anyway. Let's attack the 10 teaching myths, because we're halfway through our session and feedback will get time. I'm going to fly through them, and then we're going to
Was there a 6th dimension? Because we've only had 5.
No. Oh, you're absolutely right. Look, it was under the post-it. Professional behaviors. Teachers should take part in collaborative professional activities that enhance their practice. They should reflect on and evaluate what they do. Consider evidence and research and invest in their own development with other colleagues. Time spent away from the classroom improves learning. Guess what? We are walking that walk. That's literally what this is. Sarah, could you just reflect for me back? I don't want to bash CPD in schools, because we know it's really hit and miss. But as a tutor, how do these conversations help?
With CPD, like what we're doing now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just it widens and deepens your knowledge. So we may all be teaching different subjects, or topics, and we all teach in a very different way. But just by having an open conversation, we learn so much from each other. And I think even, you know, with the WhatsApp group and things like that, people are asking questions, and you're getting that kind of natural CPD from somebody saying, oh, you know, even if it's about systems, you know, what system do you use? How effective is it? Or I'm teaching, like today, somebody was asking about the somebody's been diagnosed as having dyslexia, and you know, I was then able to offer, oh, have you tried touch, type, read, spell? And so it's that constant CPD. When you talk, you get a constant free CPD because you're being open and honest about things. And in schools, you know, if you have got that environment where it is open and honest, and you've got a thriving staff room, that is where you get your conversations. So
that's right. Thank you. Okay, 10 teaching myths. I'm going to fly through them. No, first I'm going to give you the introduction. Classroom myths and misconceptions lurk in school like viruses. As one unfounded practice is exposed, another fad rears its ugly head. Margaret Mary, is this resonating? When it comes to improving teaching, we yearn for easy answers and quick wins. Myths are tempting as they sound scientific and often make intuitive sense, but behind many lie multi-million-pound industries preying on vulnerable teachers. Be on your guard at all times. Here we list 10 common classroom myths that endure despite widespread debunking by researchers. Honestly, I saw these incredible articles yesterday. It's important to consider what you may be doing that doesn't work, as well as what might work. Stopping doing things that are ineffective or inefficient frees up more time for the classroom teaching that is likely to make a genuine difference. Every time you decide to start something, you should also decide to
stop something.
Stop something. Right, number one. Helen, are you taking notes? Myth number one. Group learners into sets. Grouping children into sets according to their current performance makes little difference to learning outcomes, as this is the case in maths, where setting is common, as in other subjects. In theory, it allows teachers to target a narrower range of pace and content during the lesson. But in practice, it creates an exaggerated sense that pupils are at the same level. Teachers can go too fast with the high sets and too slow with the low sets. Schools do not actually test for ability. They group on current performance attainment. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many summer-born children in what are called low ability sets. Does being born in August make you less capable than being born in September? So do you know much about summer-born babies?
I've got two.
Can you unpack it?
I've got one boy who, if I was to believe what I was told before he was born, he's a summer boy. He will be behind all of his peers, and he won't make as much progress as those that were born, you know, in the first half of the year. And a girl, it doesn't really make as much difference because they're much more mature anyway, and she'll probably be fine.
Good. This is all so annoying already.
My two definitely do not fall into that category.
Wait, hold on. Just for context, in case you don't know, the assumption is that because we set classes from September to August, child who is born in August and placed in reception is always smaller and behind in their childhood development milestones than a September-born baby. They're a third of their lives more developed, right?
Yeah.
So assumptions start being made from nursery reception onwards about what this child can do.
And when do those assumptions stop? When does it start? When does it stop?
Right.
Because even when you sit the 11+, if you are a summer-born child, you would be allocated additional marks for being a summer-born
nice.
Child.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's all standardized.
It's almost like golf handicaps.
Yeah, it's all standardized scores, and then it's and then it is adapted to your age. But where does that stop? Because we're always making the assumption that that child who was born in August has never actually caught up. But actually, they're then going to step foot into secondary school and they're all on a level playing field. So yeah, there are huge assumptions about summer-born children, and you can't just say because they are a summer-born they aren't going to achieve. And if you just put them in groups for that, like they never used to start school till later. Right. You know, they wouldn't start school until January because they were the second cohort. So actually they then missed from September to January, and those older children have already had more learning. So you're actually putting them more on the back foot, in my opinion, because they're already a year behind, and now you're making them start school later. So I could talk about it for ages. Mine are August babies. They're absolutely fine. In fact, if I'd have had them at home another year, I feel I wouldn't have been able to stimulate them as much as what they needed.
Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. So there's so much in there, but really the point about separating ability from attainment, what they can do from what you've seen them do, is already a powerful distinguisher there. Okay, number 2. Encourage rereading and highlighting to memorize key ideas. Rosanna, this one's going to be for you. Rereading and highlighting are amongst the most common and apparently most obvious ways to memorize or revise. They give a deceptive feeling of being on top of the material. However, a range of studies have shown that testing yourself, trying to generate answers, and creating intervals between study to allow forgetting are all more effective approaches.
Yeah, I think even as tutors, we can probably all relate to reading the same thing over and over again, and it doesn't seem to be going in. So I think it happens obviously a lot to students. I'm not against rereading per se, though. Like, I think if it's making the point that if you do it after a long time and come back to it, that's more effective, then yeah, I agree. The highlighting thing, I often tell students to avoid, because oftentimes I find that students just go like really trigger happy with the pen and just highlight everything. And if you highlight everything, you've highlighted nothing, basically. So that's not particularly effective. So yeah, I think it's better to kind of read for comprehension at first, just make sure you've actually understood it, and then go back. And I always tell students now, you know, if you're reading something, engage with it critically. Nice. And then I have to kind of break down what that means. And I say, like, if you've got any questions that come up, like I'm teaching poetry at the moment, I say, if you read something that you find weird, not just for poetry, but other things as well, like make a note of it, like ask questions, you know, annotate it, not highlight, but like maybe sort of draw attention to keywords and things like that. And yeah, I think it's funny you say about the pens being pretty, because I was actually listening to a podcast the other day. It was so interesting. It was about somebody saying how like traumatized they were from working in a school in the UK compared to other countries, which was very, very interesting. And they were just saying that a lot of the kind of inspections of Ofsted are geared towards making the books look pretty rather than, you know, like actual kids learning and stuff like that. I think the highlighting stuff falls into that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Mary, I wanted to ask you about the use of highlighters in science revision, because I was calling on Rosanna because she's the humanities side of things. Same view.
I do use it if I'm using like a dart. So as a way of, one, giving them a piece of prose.
Sorry, dart is direct reflection time?
No, a directed activity. What is it? About reading text, something like that. Okay. So I think it was some literacy training I did. It says the textbooks, because they've got pretty pictures and diagrams, don't actually help to improve literacy. So if you give them like an article that's just text, and I would use the same article regardless of ability, and then set them an activity with it, which might be 2 different worksheets, basically.
That's a lovely distinction.
But the first part is that they actually have to then read the text. So again, I might use the language that I think the English teachers would use to say, this is continuous reading. I might read it in class, I might have read it to them, so they get to hear it. But the highlighter is the first part is just simply getting them to pull out some key ideas. So it might be, what word, highlight the word that means this, or highlight the definition of this word. And it's a way of getting them to make notes without making notes. So they're not spending ages writing notes on here's a keyword, here's the definition. They're highlighting it from the text. But then the rest of the activity, so it's a directed activity relating to text, that's what it means. And the rest of the activity then, so that is kind of to get them to engage with the text.
Yeah.
Really clearly to get them to engage with the text and key ideas. And the rest of the worksheet will be about, they'll then have to write a response. So it will be comprehension or applying what they've been reading. So that's why I would get them to do it. But there is that some kids will just highlight everything. And it's like,
and it's just colouring
that's
in,
not really what we want to do.
But I think you know, what he's saying here, a range of studies have shown that testing yourself, trying to generate answers and creating intervals between study are all better approaches. Now, really what they're saying is find ways to engage with the text, because once you're engaged with the text, it goes in, right? And then you can do those higher level thinkings of creativity and analysis. But really, the problem with the highlighter is that sometimes it's just the hand and not the brain.
Yeah. Exactly. I exactly agree with it, but I wouldn't say never use them if you're clear what you're using it for.
Absolutely right.
Because it's safe. It's also safe. It's the students feel that they're doing something with the text, so they're doing work. They're not getting into trouble by staring at a whole series of words.
Yes.
So in a way, there's a measure of safety for them to begin.
Because I was going to say, when Helen said on the thing, why highlight? I was going.
Why are you highlighting it?
Yeah, no, and I know that you were asking a critical question, how you would perform the question to a student, but so my lovely daughter that you tutored yesterday held up her notes to me and she said, "Look, I'm overusing my highlighters. Everything's colorful." Yeah, and it was you know, and she's a fantastic learner, but it's an easy. It's an easy way for her to show me that she's engaging with learning. And that element of it is important to children, that they have a way to sort of, like you said, that they feel safer, that they're sort of, you know, reassuring the adults that they are paying attention here. So I think that's quite interesting as well, because it's just very visible, isn't it?
Yeah, I also use it with my students to get into the exam question, because the feeling is of panic. Oh my God. And it's like, okay, we're going to highlight what the important information is that they're giving us. So it might be volumes and concentration, it might be data, because if they highlight this data, it's already a trigger to the relationship that they're going to need to use into what calculation they might have to do, what they might have to do with that data. That's why I would use it as a way to get into it.
Yeah, and also make connections with the different colors. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the other myths are, just to plant those seeds, and then we're going to go into feedback, because I like to do what I said I'll do. So number 3 was improve confidence and aspirations before teaching content. We looked at this a few weeks ago. If you look at the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, it will tell you that you know, shaking your pom-poms at children, rah, rah, you can do it, building aspiration, is not really meaningful to them unless it's closely associated with the actual academic gains. Number 4, teach learners in their preferred learning style. Anyone want to shout really loudly about learning styles? I'm going to read it to you. The widespread belief that students can be classified as visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners is persistent, despite several reviews debunking learning styles. One survey found over 9 in 10 teachers agreed with the claim that individuals learn better when they receive information in their preferred learning styles. Yet the evidence is clear. There are no benefits from this approach. Vary the way you present information and encourage learners to understand their strengths and capabilities, but do not limit learners by targeting what you think is their style. Rosanna?
Yeah, just really quickly wanted to comment on that. I've heard about this a lot, about it being debunked over the years and everything. And I definitely agree with the point about actually present things in a variety of different ways. However, even if there's no learning styles per se that are kind of research backed, I definitely think there's learning preferences. So some students, for example, like they like watching videos and they might prefer that initially over, you know, like reading a text and sitting there for hours and hours. So I think like it's very easy to look and just be like, forget about learning styles completely. It's a load of rubbish. But I do, like, from my own personal, you know, experience, I really like listening to podcasts as a way of learning, right? So it's like, I think we run the risk sometimes, in my personal opinion, of kind of looking at the stuff that doesn't work and being like, right, we just have to completely throw it out and just ignore it entirely. So I think like sometimes it's nice to get a bit of a middle ground and recognize that, you know, even if it's not backed up, like there might still be something that we could potentially take from it in a different way, if that makes sense.
Very helpful to not be too black and white with any of this information, and to use all the tools.
And we want the students to learn, and we want them to be comfortable in their learning. We want them to feel safe, and we want them to trust us.
Well, there's apparently a new study coming out, which lists 48 or 148 or a very big number of learning strategies, they're calling them, and the number of strategies that you deploy are then become your preferences. So I think it's just that the VAK approach was oversimplified, and it certainly was overblown because it was asking teachers to plan 3 lessons, which is not right. Number 5, ensure learners are active, not passive. So this is actually attacking the brain gym idea. And it's saying, rather than getting your children up to jump around in the middle of the lesson, maybe you just want to make sure that your lessons are not dull. Genuinely what he says. Number 6, digital technology increases boys' motivation and engagement. He says, yes, but it also improves girls' motivation and engagement too. Number 7, teaching assistants don't help pupils to progress. It's true that poorly managed and prepared teaching assistants have little impact on learning, but that's the whole point. They need to be managed by teachers and be prepared and trained. TAs can be invaluable secondary educators. Secondary educators is an interesting phrase for us, isn't it? Yes, how a properly prepared and trained teaching assistant might be a tutor. That is, one-to-one or small group work that a TA is doing with a class is tutoring, and they need training in how to tutor effectively, what the teacher needs from them, joining up that conversation. If they're just sitting at the back of the class with scissors and Pritt stick, preparing displays, something's gone wrong. Number 9, it's always good to praise pupils. Dee, we've spoken about this. Praising pupils can feel like the right thing to do, affirming the work of learners. But studies suggest the wrong kinds of praise can do more harm than good. I'm going to leave it there. We've discussed toxic praise, and there's a lot about it in my book as well. Number 10, allow learners to discover things for themselves. There is no evidence that discovery learning works better than other approaches. ... I'm not going into Montessori now. You can't make me. I'm going to leave it there and go into feedback for the last 10 minutes. But I think, just like we said about highlighters, rolling our sleeves up and engaging in the content was the goal. Effective feedback for learning. So this is the highest ranking type of intervention, and that's why we're focusing on it. If you look at the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, it is very inexpensive and can be very effective. But, okay, hold on. Learning benefits: boost the confidence of pupils and their belief they can succeed. Pupils must overcome perceived threats to take leaps in learning. Hold on to that idea of leaps. Builds a climate of trust in the classroom through which greater challenge can be provided, which of course has relationship underpinning it. Unexpected finding, this is what I want to hold on to as well. Feedback can make things worse. Okay, so not all feedback is created equal. Teaching tips: tell learners when they are right and why more than when they are wrong. I know this is something that Dee's really passionate about. Show learners where they have improved. Praise selectively. Use digital feedback where appropriate. Provide feedback for challenging tasks. And develop peer feedback. So those of us who are tutoring in groups really need to lean into the peer as well as the mentor. Right, so let's think about it for a second. So as we know, feedback can come from a variety of sources, from other adults, teaching assistants, older pupils, digital technology. Those were those pings that we mentioned in the last session. And then other collaborative learning opportunities. The aim is to get learners to internalize the feedback so they can monitor and improve their own learning. So we are moving towards metacognitive self-regulation. That's what we really want with feedback. We want the feedback to be internal. Yeah. So when we mess up, we know it usually before others, right? That's our internal feedback system. So it says here, and I think this is really powerful, feedback is an emotional and cognitive process. So we didn't see the word emotional coming there. Feedback is an emotional and cognitive process. Students may face threats to their well-being when considering leaps in learning. The fear of losing face in front of their peers, or the fear of getting a question wrong. Pupils will take one of two roads: the growth pathway to make learning gains, or the well-being pathway to avoid threats. Learning gaps must therefore be large enough to extend learners, but not so big that they're set up to fail. Pupils will make more effort if they believe ability is malleable rather than fixed, and if they're oriented towards mastery or self-improvement rather than performance or how well they do compared with their peers. Feedback shouldn't threaten pupils' belief in their ability to learn. Feedback from peers and digital technology is often seen as lower threat than feedback from a teacher or other adult with authority. It can also be easier to increase the quantity of feedback from peers and technology than from an already overworked teacher or tutor. Right. James, can I call on you first?
Yes.
What are your insights from that information about feedback?
I think it's really important to make sure students understand what they're doing well. And I like to phrase things in a certain way when I'm giving feedback. So if a student's not doing something well, I say, I sort of phrase it, this is what we can improve on. Or if someone's doing something really well, I say, this is excellent, this is really good. So I was trying to phrase it I think, put things in a more positive way.
Really interesting how you use the word we. This is what we can improve on. That already was gentler than this is what you can improve on. Because it's almost like, instinctively you have to be careful not to, stand to, create distance. You need to create closeness when you're sharing feedback.
Yeah, I always say we, like we're doing it together. Because if you say you, it sort of takes you aback a bit.
It does, yeah. I'd never thought of that before. Dee, what are your thoughts?
Agree with James. I mean, I had a student yesterday. He's, a very able year 10 student. I asked him to explain something, and he gave me a mathematically rigorous explanation, because we talked about it and we talked through it, and I'd shown him why this was better. He did it all by himself, and I said, yes, well done I could see, and he knew that he'd done it, but for me then to recognize that he'd done exactly what we talked about, and it boosted him no end. So the reinforcing what they're doing right. I don't just say good or that's great. I always give him an explanation. There was something else that I was going to say as well.
Coming back to you. You can have it for your 30
just...
seconds. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. You can have it for your 30 seconds. I'm going around the room. A 30-second insight. Margaret Mary, go.
I have it 3 tiers. One is clear from your answer, you understand this, but it could be understood a different way. It's ambiguous. So then we look at improving the answer together to make it less ambiguous. And then we say, let's have a look at what the examiner wants So we recognise that doing it for the examiner might mean something slightly different because we have to placate them at the end of the day.
Isn't that interesting how you bring that in as the straw man? He can take the blame. This is what we have to do for him. Sarah
Well,
Webb,
they have different characters. They're fussy.
Yeah. Sarah Webb, what's your reflection from this session?
I'm going to go away and think about feedback to individual children in the group sessions and how perhaps I could make that more effective, because I do a lot of group feedback, but I'm really going to reflect on that personal feedback that I might be able to give them more instantaneously. I think that's
fantastic. I'd love to hear about that. I'd also love to hear about the peer feedback that you might build in. Rosanna?
Yeah, I really like the idea of peer feedback as well. And I think it's really easy with feedback to fall into platitudes and just say, like, you know, well done. But I think making your feedback really specific and targeted. And it's not really about what you say, it's how you say it as well. So I really like James's point about saying, like, this is something we could work on, because it makes it less like you're distant from them and that it's more collaborative, which is really nice.
Really nice. If you haven't seen it recently, you must watch Austin's Butterfly, which is the most delightful video on the power of feedback. Austin's Butterfly. Margaret Mary's nodding along. James, you watched it recently on the course, didn't you? What's your reflection from this session, James?
For me, it's mainly I want to come to these. For me personally, to get out of the sessions is to build myself more knowledge. I think I'm sort of sparking my brain to think of more ideas, what I can implement in my practice. And it questions myself. It sort of feeds myself back. Yeah. Am I doing this the right way? Could I improve? So out of these sessions, that's what I'm getting.
Fantastic. It's
a lot of self-improvement.
So healthy. Helen, yours?
I'm good well on that emotional line, that emotional and cognitive process. I'm doing some stuff on metacognition at the moment and just thinking about, actually, there's an emotional side to feedback. But a student needs to be in the right headspace to hear it and manage the emotional side.
Explore readiness. Beautiful. And Dee, finish us off.
Because I do one-to-one, not groups, I can't do the peer feedback thing, but I can make the student question themselves about why this was good and what could I do to do better. So when I was way back when I was teaching, I did a little action research project on peer feedback. So yeah, I think being more intentional one-to-one with getting the students to, as James said, I do this reflection thing at the end. But what went well? Why did it go well? But what can I take on? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to go away and look at? And in fact, for a couple of my newish students,
got a time issue.
In the bit paper, the final page isn't just a content, so it tells them what's on each page, but there's also a running list of topics and things that they need to go back and revisit.
Guardrails, really, really nice. I just want to share with you, I'm just preparing a session on rubber duck debugging, which is an idea from coding, where coders who don't necessarily have friends to talk things through with, they talk to a rubber duck and they tell them their problems, because frankly nobody's husband or wife wants to hear it, and they talk through whatever the problem is, and in the clarifying they tend to find solutions. So I think that your students need a rubber duck, Dee, and then they can tell them what they've learned. Thank you so much. You guys are so exceptional. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Margaret Mary. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Rosanna. Thanks, James. You guys are the best. Have a great weekend.